When barefoot drifter Willa James tames a wild stallion with nothing but quiet strength, catching the attention of Carter Langston, the estate's proud owner. But in a world ruled by appearances, can love rewrite legacy? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The morning sun shone brightly over Langston Acres, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns. Carter Langston stood at the window of his office, a cup of expensive coffee in his hand. At 46, he was still handsome, with salt and pepper hair that only made him look more distinguished. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, just like everything else in his life. Carter took a sip of his coffee and looked out at his empire. Langston Acres was the most prestigious horse estate in Virginia's wine country. The white fences gleamed in the sunlight, and in the distance he could see his prized horses grazing in the fields. Everything was perfect, just as it should be. Mr. Langston, his assistant Margaret, called from the doorway. The new Stablehand applicants are waiting. Carter nodded without turning around. Send them in one at a time. Interviews were unnecessary, evil. Finding staff who understood the level of excellence he demanded wasn't easy. His father's voice still echoed in his head. Langstons don't settle for second best. The first 3 applicants were exactly what he expected. Experienced, respectful, and properly dressed. He hired 2 of them on the spot. The 4th was scheduled for 11, but at 11:30 there was still no sign of them. Margaret, Carter called, checking his watch with annoyance. Did the last applicant cancel? Before Margaret could answer, there was a commotion at the front entrance. Carter stepped out of his office to see what was happening. A woman with wild curly brown hair stood in his grand foyer, arguing with his security guard. She wore faded jeans with holes in the knees, a simple t-shirt, and most shocking of all, no shoes. I have an appointment, she insisted, waving a crumpled piece of paper at the guard. Ma'am, I can't let you in looking like that, the guard replied firmly. Carter should have let the guard turn her away. Instead, he found himself walking toward them. I'm Carter Langston, he said, his voice cool and controlled. And you are? The woman turned to him, her face lighting up with relief. Willa James, I'm here about the Stablehand position. She thrust out a wrinkled resume with what looked like coffee stains on one corner. Carter took the paper reluctantly. Her handwriting was messy, almost childlike. Everything about her screamed unprofessional. You're late, he said, glancing at his watch again. My truck broke down about a mile back, she explained, not sounding particularly apologetic. Had to. Walk the rest of the way. Barefoot? Carter couldn't help asking. Willa shrugged. Shoes just slow me down sometimes. Carter was about to dismiss her when a loud commotion came from the direction of the stables. One of his trainers ran toward them, panic on his face. Mr. Langston, it's storm warning. He's gone crazy again and we can't get near him. Storm Warning was Carter's newest acquisition, a magnificent black stallion with championship bloodlines. The horse had cost him a fortune, but no one had been able to train him. The animal was too wild, too unpredictable. Without thinking, Carter headed toward the stables, forgetting about the barefoot woman with the messy resume. But she followed right behind him, moving quickly despite her lack of footwear. At the stables, a small crowd of workers stood outside Storm Warning's stall. Inside, the massive black stallion was rearing and kicking at the walls. 2 men with rope halters stood nervously at the door, unsure how to proceed. He almost took Jim's head off, one of the trainers explained. We might need to sedate him again. Before Carter could respond, Willa James squeezed past him and approached the stall door. Miss James, stay back, Carter ordered, but she ignored him. The stable hands looked at her like she was crazy as she unlatched the door and slipped inside the stall with the dangerous horse. Carter held his breath, ready to call for medical help. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Willa stood perfectly still in the corner of the stall. She didn't reach for the horse or make any sudden movements. She just stood there, her eyes fixed on Storm Warning. The stallion snorted and pawed at the ground, but Willa didn't flinch. Hey there, big guy, she said softly. That's a lot of noise you're making. Slowly, the horse's movements became less frantic. His ears, which had been pinned back in anger, gradually moved forward. You just don't like being told what to do you? Willa continued in that same gentle voice. I get that, me neither. To Carter's amazement, Storm Warning lowered his head and took a tentative step toward Willa. She remained still, letting the horse make the decision. After a moment that seemed to stretch forever, the stallion moved closer and exhaled softly, his breath ruffling Willa's curly hair. She slowly raised her hand and placed it on his neck. The horse didn't pull away. "You see," she said, glancing over at Carter with a small shrug, "sometimes they just need someone to listen." Carter couldn't look away. In all his years working with horses, he'd never seen anything like it. This woman, who didn't fit any of his standards for excellence, had just done what his most experienced trainers couldn't. "How did you do that?" he asked when she finally emerged from the stall, closing the door behind her. Storm Warning remained calm, watching her through the bars. "I didn't do anything special," Willa answered. "I just gave him a choice instead of an order." Carter looked at her more carefully now. Her hands were rough and calloused, her skin tanned from working outdoors. Despite her disheveled appearance, there was something in her eyes, a quiet confidence. That came from experience, not arrogance. "So about that job," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. "I'm good with horses, Mr. Langston. Really good. And I need the work." Against his better judgment, Carter found himself nodding. "Report to the head groom tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. sharp." A genuine smile spread across Willa's face, revealing straight white teeth and crinkling the corners of her eyes. "I'll be here. 5:30 even." As she turned to leave, Carter called after her, "And Miss James? Please wear shoes tomorrow." She grinned over her shoulder. "No promises." Carter watched her walk away, barefoot across his immaculate lawn. For the first time in years, something at Langston Acres didn't fit his perfect vision, and strangely he wasn't upset about it. The next morning, Carter woke before dawn. He told himself he was just doing his usual rounds, but he found himself heading straight to the stables. When he arrived, Willa was already there, mucking out stalls as if she'd been working at Langston Acres for years. She wore boots today, worn leatherwork boots that had clearly seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her clothes were simple but clean. "Morning, boss," she called out when she spotted him. She didn't sound surprised to see him there so early. "How's Storm Warning?" Carter asked, trying to sound casual. "See for yourself." Willa gestured toward the stallion's stall. Carter approached cautiously. The horse that had been a terror just yesterday now stood calmly eating his breakfast. When Storm Warning saw Carter, he raised his head but didn't show any signs of agitation. "I spent some time with him last night after everyone left," Willa explained. "Just talking, mostly." "You stayed late?" She nodded. "I'm living out of my truck right now, so it's not like I had anywhere better to be." Carter frowned. "Your truck? You don't have an apartment?" "Lost my family's farm 6 months ago. Been on the move since then, picking up work where I can." She said it matter-of-factly, without a hint of self-pity. Carter's frown deepened. He had vacant staff quarters on the property, small but comfortable apartments for employees who needed to live on site. "That won't do," he said firmly. "I have quarters available for essential staff. You'll move in today." Willa shook her head. "Thanks, but I'm fine in my truck. I don't need charity." "It's not charity, Miss James. It's common sense. I can't have my horse whisperer sleeping in a parking lot." She looked at him with surprise. "Horse whisperer, is that what I am now?" "You tell me," Carter replied, nodding toward Storm Warning. "You're the only one who's been able to get through to him." A hint of pride flashed in Willa's eyes. "All right, Mr. Langston. I'll take the room, but only because it'll let me be closer to the horses." Throughout that first week, Carter found more and more reasons to visit the stables. He told himself he was checking on Storm Warning's progress, but he knew it wasn't just the horse he was interested in. Willa worked harder than anyone he'd ever employed. She was up before sunrise and often stayed well past dinner, checking on the horses one last time before bed. She sang while she worked, old country songs that his mother used to hum when he was a child. "You don't act like a rich man," she said. To him one evening as they were both leaving the stables, Carter raised an eyebrow. "What does a rich man act like?" "Oh, you know," Willa said with a laugh. "Bossy, entitled, afraid to get their hands dirty. You're only one of those things." "Let me guess, bossy." Bingo. Her smile was teasing, not mocking. Carter found himself smiling back. I prefer to think of it as having high standards. Same difference, she replied with a shrug. As they walked toward the main house, Carter noticed Willa limping slightly. Are you hurt? He asked. Just a bit sore. One of the new mares got spooked during her bath and stepped on my foot. Without thinking, Carter said, Come up to the house, I have a first aid kit. Willa hesitated, looking down at her dirty clothes. I'm not exactly dressed for your fancy marble floors. They'll survive, Carter assured her. Inside his sprawling home, Willa looked oddly out of place, yet strangely right. She didn't gawk at the expensive furniture or artwork like most people did. Instead, she noticed the little things. The photo of his parents on the mantel, the worn book of poetry on his desk. You actually read these? She asked, picking up the poetry book. When I have time, Carter admitted, which isn't often these days. As he bandaged her foot, Carter found himself telling Willa about the history of Langston Acres, how his grandfather had built it from nothing, how his father had turned it into a social hotspot, and how Carter himself had transformed it into a serious competitor in the equestrian world. What about what you wanted? Willa asked. The question caught Carter off guard. What do you mean? Did you always want this? She gestured around at his grand home. Or did you just inherit the dream along with everything else? No one had ever asked him that before. For a moment, Carter didn't know how to answer. I wanted to make my father proud, he said finally. Willa nodded, as if that told her everything she needed to know. Parents have a way of shaping us, don't they? Whether they mean to or not. As Carter walked her back to the staff quarters, he found himself wondering about her past. What had shaped Willa James into the strong, straightforward woman who wasn't? Impressed by his wealth or status? For the first time in years, Carter was genuinely curious about someone else's story. And as he watched Willa disappear into her new temporary home, he realized something that both thrilled and terrified him. He wanted to know everything about her. 2 weeks flew by at Langston Acres. Willa settled into a routine, spending most of her time with the horses and keeping to herself. Carter found himself inventing reasons to check on the stables, something his staff had begun to notice. You seem to be taking a special interest in the horses lately, Margaret commented one morning as she handed Carter his schedule for the day. Store morning is making progress, Carter replied, avoiding her knowing gaze. It's a significant investment. Of course, Margaret said with a small smile. I'm sure it has nothing to do with our new stable hand. Carter changed the subject, but he couldn't deny the truth to himself. Willa James had awakened something in him that had been dormant for years. She made him question the life he'd built, a life of appearances and expectations. One rainy afternoon, Carter cancelled his meetings and headed to the stables. He found Willa sitting on a hay bale, her legs crossed under her, talking softly to a young foal that had been born the week before. You're going to be something special, she was saying to the gangly little creature. I can tell. The quiet ones usually are. Is that so? Carter asked, making his presence known. Willa looked up, not startled in the least. It's true. My mother used to say the still waters run deep. Carter leaned against the stall door. Tell me about your mother. Willa's expression softened. She was the strongest person I've ever known. Raised me on her own after my dad left. Kept our little farm running even when the bank threatened to take it. What happened to her? Carter asked gently. Cancer, Willa said simply. 3 years. I took care of her until the end, then tried to keep the farm going. But medical bills piled up, and then last winter was harsh. Lost 2 horses to illness. She shrugged, but Carter could see the pain behind her casual gesture. The bank finally got their way 6 months ago. I'm sorry, Carter said, meaning it. Life happens, Willa replied. Mom always said it's not. What happens to you, but how you handle it that matters. She stood up, brushing hay from her jeans. What about your parents? That's them in the photo in your house, right? Carter nodded. My father passed away 5 years ago. Heart attack on the golf course. My mother lives in Florida now. Comes to visit twice a year, stays for exactly 1 week, then can't wait to get back to her social circle. Sounds lonely, Willa observed. The simple comment hit Carter like a blow. Lonely. Yes, That was exactly what his life had become, though he'd never admitted it to himself. "I have staff, business associates, clients," he said defensively. Willa raised an eyebrow. "That's not the same as having people who really know you, who see past all this." She gestured around at the expensive stable with its state-of-the-art equipment. Before Carter could respond, one of the grooms rushed in. "Mr. Langston, the new foal's mother is down. Doc Wilson is on his way, but it doesn't look good." They hurried to the mare's stall. The beautiful bay horse was lying on her side, breathing heavily, clearly in distress. The local vet arrived minutes later, his face grim as he examined her. "Colic, and it's bad," Dr. Wilson announced. "We need to get her to the clinic for surgery, right away." The next hours were a blur of activity. The mare was carefully loaded into a trailer and rushed to the vet clinic. Carter insisted on following in his car, and to his surprise, Willa jumped in beside him without asking permission. "You shouldn't come," Carter said as he pulled out of the driveway. "This could be a long night." "That mare needs all the support she can get," Willa replied firmly, "and so does her baby." At the clinic, they waited together while the veterinarians worked. Carter paced the small waiting room while Willa sat quietly, her eyes closed. "Are you praying?" Carter asked after watching her for a while. "Something like that," Willa answered without opening her eyes. "My mom believed everything has a spirit. The land, the trees, the animals. When she was sick, she taught me to send my energy out to whatever needed healing." She opened her eyes and gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "Probably sounds silly to someone like you." "Someone like me?" Carter repeated. Practical, business-minded." Carter sat down beside her. "My father was practical. Said emotions were a waste of time. But when I was 10, my favorite horse died. That night I found my father in the stable, crying over that horse's empty stall." Willa's eyes softened. "Sounds like your father had a heart under all that practicality." "Maybe," Carter conceded. "I didn't see it often. The surgery took hours. When the vet finally emerged, his scrubs were stained with blood. We did everything we could," he said solemnly. "But she didn't make it." Carter felt a hollow ache in his chest. The mare had been expensive, yes, but it was more than that. Every loss on the farm felt personal. "The foal," Willa said immediately. "He'll need special care now," the vet nodded. "Round-the-clock feeding, someone will need to stay with him constantly for the first few days." "I'll do it," Willa volunteered without hesitation. "We have staff," Carter began, but Willa cut him. "Hoff, I know what I'm doing. I've hand-raised foals before." Back at Langston Acres, Willa set up a makeshift bed in the stall next to the orphaned foal. Carter watched as she prepared special formula and coaxed the confused baby to drink from a bottle. "Go back to the house," she told him around midnight. "There's nothing you can do here." But Carter couldn't bring himself to leave. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and asked, "What can I do to help?" Surprise flickered across Willa's face, quickly, replaced by approval. "You can help me keep him warm. Body heat is best." For the next 3 nights, they took turns sitting with the foal, keeping him warm, feeding him every 2 hours. Carter cancelled meetings and delegated tasks that couldn't wait. For once in his life, the business wasn't his top priority. On the 3rd night, exhaustion caught up with them. Carter found himself sitting on the straw-covered floor, his back against the wall, with Willa beside him. The foal was finally sleeping peacefully, his small sides rising and falling steadily. "You're not what I expected," Willa said softly, her voice thick with fatigue. "What did you expect?" Carter asked. "Someone cold. Too important to get dirty. But here you are, sitting in the hay at 3 in the morning, your expensive clothes ruined, all for a foal that most businessmen would write off as a loss." Her words warmed something in Carter's chest. Maybe I'm not the man I thought I was either. Without thinking, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Willa went very still, her eyes holding his in the dim light of the stable. The moment stretched between them, fragile and new. Then the foal stirred, breaking the spell. Willa quickly moved to check on him, and the opportunity passed. But something had changed between them. Carter knew it, and he was certain Willa felt it too. The next morning, Carter arrived at the stable to find Willa leading the foal around on wobbly legs. She looked exhausted but triumphant. "He's going to make it," she announced proudly. "Thanks." "To you," Carter replied. He hesitated, then added, "You should take the day off, get some real sleep." Willa shook her head. "I'm fine. Besides, he still needs feeding every few hours." "I can handle it," Carter insisted. "I've been watching you, learning the routine." Willa looked doubtful. The great Carter Langston, spending his day bottle-feeding an orphaned foal? What would your high society friends say? "I don't care what they'd say," Carter replied, surprising himself with the truth of the statement. Eventually, Willa agreed to rest, but only for a few hours. When she returned to the stables that afternoon, she found Carter sitting on a hay bale, the foal's head in his lap, reading aloud from a book of poetry. "Is that Frost?" she asked, recognizing the verses. Carter closed the book, somewhat embarrassed. "It was my mother's favorite. She used to read to me when I was sick." Willa sat down beside him. "I wouldn't have pegged you for a poetry lover." "There's a lot you don't know about me," Carter replied. "I'm starting to see that." Willa's smile was warm, inviting him to share more. Over the next few weeks, as the foal grew stronger, so did the connection between them. Carter found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. His doubts about taking over the family business, the pressure he'd always felt to live up to his father's expectations, his secret dream of breeding horses, not for show, but for their strength and spirit. And Willa shared too. She told him about the small farm where she'd grown up, about the fiancé who'd left when her mother got sick and the money got tight, about her dreams of someday having a place of her own again, even if it was just a few acres with a couple of horses. "You could have that here," Carter said one evening as they walked the property after dinner, another new habit they'd fallen into. "Langston Acres is big enough." Willa shook her head. "This is your world, Carter, not mine. I don't belong here." "Why not?" he challenged. "You know more about horses than most of my trainers. The animals respond to you. Even the staff respects you now." "That's different from fitting in," Willa argued. "I'm still the barefoot girl who talks to horses. Your clients look at me like I'm some kind of curiosity." It was true. When potential buyers or business associates visited the estate, they often seemed taken aback by Willa's casual manner and plain speaking. More than once, Carter had overheard whispers questioning his judgment in giving her so much responsibility. But he didn't care. For the first time in years, Langston Acres felt alive, and it was all because of her. One morning, Carter received an invitation to the Virginia Elite Equestrian Show, the most prestigious event in the region. Normally, he would have immediately started preparations, selecting his best horses and riders to represent Langston Acres. This time, however, he found himself hesitating. The show represented everything about his old life: the social politics, the endless competition, the obsession with appearances. Without fully understanding why, Carter took the invitation to Willa, finding her in the training ring with storm warning. The once unmanageable stallion was now responding to her subtle commands, moving with grace and power. "What do you think?" Carter asked, showing her the gilded invitation. "Should we enter storm warning?" Willa looked surprised. "You're asking my opinion? You know him better than anyone," Carter replied simply. She studied the horse thoughtfully. "He's special, Carter. Not just because he's fast or beautiful, but because he has heart. If you enter him just to win ribbons, you'll break that heart." "What if I entered him to show the world what he can do? What you've done with him?" A slow smile spread across Willa's face. "Then I'd say he'd make us all proud." "Us." The word hung in the air between them. Not employer and employee, but partners. Equals. "There's something else," Carter said, his heart beating faster. "The show has a formal dinner the night before. I'd like you to come. With me." Willa's smile faded. "As your date? Carter, that's not a good idea." "Why not?" "Because I don't belong in that world. I don't have fancy dresses or know which fork to use. I'd embarrass you." "You could never embarrass me," Carter said firmly. "You're the most real person I've ever met. Besides," he added with a small smile, "I have it on good authority that there's a very good personal shopper at the mall in town." Willa laughed despite herself. "Are you offering to buy me a dress, Mr. Langston?" "I'm offering you a chance to shine," Carter replied seriously. "To show everyone what I already know, that you're extraordinary." For a moment, he thought she would refuse. Then, to his delight, she nodded. "All right," she said. "But don't expect me to act like someone I'm not." Carter's heart soared. "I wouldn't want you any other way." As he walked back to the house, Carter realized he was happier than he'd been in years. The show was still weeks away, but already he was looking forward to it. Not for the prestige or the business connections, but for the chance to spend an evening with Willa outside of the stables, to see her dressed up, to show her off to the world, and perhaps to finally tell her what he was beginning to suspect, that he was falling in love with her. The days leading up to the Virginia Elite Equestrian Show were busy at Langston Acres. Carter threw himself into preparations, making sure Storm Warning was ready to compete. Willa worked with the stallion daily, and their bond grew stronger with each session. "He trusts you completely," Carter observed one afternoon as he watched them in the training ring. "Trust goes both ways," Willa replied, patting the horse's neck. "That's something people forget sometimes." Her words made Carter wonder if she was talking about more than just horses. Despite the connection that had grown between them, Willa still kept parts of herself guarded. She avoided most social gatherings at the estate and rarely joined Carter when business associates visited. 3 days before the show, Carter's mother, Eleanor Langston, arrived unexpectedly from Florida. She swept into the main house in a cloud of expensive perfume, air-kissing Carter's cheeks. "Darling, I simply had to come when I heard you were entering the Virginia Elite," she said, handing her designer luggage to the waiting staff. It's been years since Langston Acres made an appearance there. Carter hadn't told his mother about the show. "How did you hear about it?" Vivian Whitcomb called me. Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "Her son is judging this year. You remember Bradford Whitcomb, don't you? He always had a crush on you in prep school," Carter sighed. His mother never missed an opportunity to remind him that at 46, he was still single. In her world, marriage was just another business arrangement, preferably one that expanded family connections and wealth. "Mother, I'm very busy with preparations." "Nonsense," Eleanor interrupted. "You have staff for that. I want you to take me to lunch and tell me all about what's been happening here. The gardens look different. And did I see someone living in the old groundskeeper's cottage? I thought you turned that into storage." Before Carter could answer, the front door opened again, and Willa walked in. She'd clearly just come from the stables. Her jeans were dusty, and wisps of hay clung to her curly hair. As always, there was a natural ease to her movements, a confidence that came from being comfortable in her own skin. Eleanor stared at her, in obvious disapproval. "Who is this?" Carter stepped forward. "Mother, this is Willa James, our horse trainer. Willa, my mother, Eleanor Langston." Willa smiled politely and extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Langston." Eleanor barely touched Willa's fingers before, withdrawing her hand. "A female horse trainer? How progressive of you, Carter." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. Carter felt a flash of anger, but Willa seemed unfazed. "I came to tell you that Storm Warning is ready for his final check by Dr. Wilson," she said to Carter, ignoring Eleanor's comment. "He wants to see him before we transport him to the showgrounds." "I'll be right there," Carter promised. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "You're going to the stables now?" "But I just arrived." "This is important, Mother," Carter said firmly. "Why don't you get settled in? We can have lunch when I return." Eleanor's lips thinned in displeasure, but she nodded stiffly. As Willa and Carter headed for the door, Eleanor called out, "Oh, and Carter, the Prestons are having their annual gala after the show. I've already accepted their invitation on your behalf." Carter turned back, frowning. "Mother, I have plans." "Plans can be changed," Eleanor said, her tone making it clear she expected to be obeyed. "Miriam Preston's niece will be visiting from New York. She's a lawyer with an excellent family and her own trust fund. I think you'll find her suitable company." From the corner of his eye, Carter saw Willa's shoulders stiffen. Without another word, she walked out the door. "Mother," Carter said with forced patience, "I appreciate your concern for my social life, but I'm perfectly capable of managing it myself." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Is that what this is about? That girl? Really?" "Carter, she's a stable hand. Your father would be appalled." Carter felt his temper rising. "My father isn't here." "And Willa is a gifted trainer who's done more for this farm in a few months than most of our staff have done in years." I see, Eleanor said coldly. Well, I hope you remember who you are before you make a fool of yourself over some country. Girl? Carter left without responding, knowing anything he said would only make things worse. Outside, he found Willa waiting by his truck, her expression unreadable. I'm sorry about that, he said as they drove toward the stables. Don't be. Willa replied, looking out the window. Your mother is exactly what I expected. And what's that supposed to mean? It means she wants what's best for you according to her definition of best. I can't fault her for that. Willa turned to look at him. But I'm not part of that definition. Carter, I never will be. That's her problem, not mine, Carter said firmly. Willa shook her head. No, it's our problem if you think this, whatever is happening between us, can go anywhere. The words stung, but before Carter could respond, they arrived at the stables where Dr. Wilson was waiting. The moment for honesty passed, replaced by the business of preparing storm warning for the show. For the next 2 days, Carter found himself caught between worlds. His mother filled the house with old family friends and business associates, all eager to reconnect with the Langston heir. Meanwhile, Willa retreated further into her work, spending all her time with the horses and avoiding the main house entirely. The night before they were scheduled to leave for the show, Carter finally managed to escape his mother's dinner party. He found Willa sitting on the fence of the training ring, staring up at the stars. Hiding from me? He asked, leaning against the fence beside her. Just thinking, she replied without looking at him. About tomorrow? Willa nodded. Storm warning is ready. He's going to be magnificent. I wasn't asking about the horse. Now she turned to face him, her expression serious. This past week has been a good reminder, Carter. Your world and mine, they don't mix. They've been mixing just fine until my mother showed up, Carter argued. That's because we've been in our own little bubble here. Tomorrow, at that show, everyone will be watching, judging. I don't belong in that world. So what are you saying? Carter felt a knot forming in his stomach. Willa sighed. I'm saying I think I should find another job after the show. Somewhere I fit. You fit here, Carter insisted, reaching for her hand. With me. She looked down at their joined hands, but didn't pull away. Do I? Your mother has been introducing you to suitable women all week. Women from good families with trust funds and the right background. I don't care about any of that. Maybe you should, Willa said softly. Life would be a lot easier if you were with someone from your own world. Easier isn't always better, Carter replied. Making a decision, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I was going to wait until after the show, but maybe now is better. Willa stared at the box with wide eyes. Carter, what are you doing? It's not what you think, he said with a small smile. He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a small horse. This was my grandmother's. She loved horses more than anything in the world. My grandfather gave it to her when they first met. It's beautiful, Willa whispered. She was like you in many ways, straightforward, honest, more comfortable in the stables than at parties. Carter took the bracelet and clasped it around Willa's wrist. My mother doesn't talk about her much because she married beneath her station. My grandfather was just a horse trainer when they met. Willa looked up in surprise. Really? Carter nodded. He built all this for her, to prove to her family that he could provide the life she deserved. But she always said the happiest days were the early ones, when they had nothing but a small stable and each other. Why are you telling me this? Willa asked, her voice barely audible. Because I want you to know that I understand what matters, and it's not what my mother thinks. Carter touched her cheek gently. It's this. What we have. What we could have. If you're willing to give it a chance. For a long moment, Willa said nothing. Then, slowly, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, hesitant at first, then warming as Carter pulled her closer. When they finally parted, Willa looked both happy and scared. I'm still not wearing a fancy dress to that dinner tomorrow, she warned. Carter laughed, relief flooding through him. Wear whatever makes you comfortable. All I care about is that you'll be there. The next morning, they left for the showgrounds early, before Eleanor and her entourage were awake. The 3-hour drive passed quickly as they talked about the competition ahead and carefully avoided discussing what had happened between them the night before. At the showgrounds, Carter was immediately pulled into a whirlwind of greetings and business conversations. Everyone wanted to talk to the Langston heir, especially since Langston Acres hadn't competed in the elite for years. Willa busied herself with settling Storm Warning into his temporary stall and making sure he was comfortable in the new environment. The stallion was nervous, picking up on the energy of the busy showgrounds. "It's all right, big guy," she murmured, stroking his neck. "We've got this." "So you're the famous Willa James," a voice said from behind her. Willa turned to find a tall, elegantly dressed woman watching her with curious eyes. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "Vivian Whitcomb," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm a friend of Eleanor's. She's told me all about you." "I doubt that," Willa replied cautiously, shaking the offered hand. Vivian laughed, a practiced social sound. "Well, perhaps not in a flattering light. Eleanor is protective of her son." "As she should be," Willa said, turning back to Storm Warning. "That's a magnificent animal," Vivian observed. "Did you train him yourself?" Willa nodded, running her hand along the horse's sleek neck. "He just needed someone to understand him." "Is that all Carter needed too?" Vivian asked, her voice suddenly sharp. Willa looked at her in surprise. "Excuse me?" "Let's be honest, dear. Carter Langston has been Virginia's most eligible bachelor for years. He's rich, handsome, and from one of the oldest families in the state. Do you really think someone like you can hold his interest for long?" Anger flared in Willa's chest, but she kept her voice calm. "I think that's between Carter and me." Vivian stepped closer. "Listen to me carefully. You're a novelty to him right now, something different, exciting. But novelties wear off. When that happens, he'll go back to women who understand his world, who can help him maintain his position in society." "Is that what he needs, or what you think he needs?" Willa challenged. "It's what the Langston name needs," Vivian replied firmly. "That estate, that legacy, it requires certain sacrifices. Carter understands that, even if he's temporarily forgotten." Before Willa could respond, Carter appeared at the entrance to the stall. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his eyes moving between the two women. "Just getting acquainted with your new trainer," Vivian said smoothly. "She's certainly made an impression on Storm Warning. Let's hope she can work the same magic in the ring tomorrow." With a final meaningful look at Willa, Vivian glided away, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind her. "What was that about?" Carter asked. "Just more reminders that I don't belong here," Willa said quietly. Carter took her hand. "Don't let her get to you. Vivian Whitcomb has been trying to match me with her nieces and granddaughters for years." Willa managed a small smile, but Vivian's words had hit their mark. Looking around at the elegant people in designer clothes, discussing bloodlines and social connections, she felt more out of place than ever. "The formal dinner starts in 2 hours," Carter said, checking his watch. "Will you be ready?" For a moment, Willa hesitated. Then, remembering their kiss under the stars, she nodded. "I'll be ready." Back at the hotel, Willa stared at the dress she'd bought for the occasion. It was simpler than what the other women would be wearing. A knee-length navy blue dress with a modest neckline. Still, it was fancier than anything she'd worn in years. As she got ready, Willa couldn't stop thinking about Vivian's words and Eleanor's obvious disapproval. Was she setting herself up for heartbreak by believing she could be part of Carter's world? Or was she selling him short by assuming he couldn't break free from the expectations that had shaped his life? The silver bracelet caught the light as she fastened it around her wrist. Whatever happened, tonight she would hold her head high. She might not belong in this world, but she wasn't going to apologize for who she was or what she felt for Carter. The ballroom of the Grand Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and polished silver, women in designer gowns and men in tailored tuxedos mingled, their laughter mixing with the soft music played by a string quartet. Carter stood near the entrance, checking his watch for the third time. He'd arranged to meet Willa there, giving her privacy to get ready. Now, he was beginning to worry she'd changed her mind. "Carter, darling," his mother approached, champagne in hand. "Bradford Whitcomb has been asking for you. He's over by the bar with Lillian Preston. You remember her, the lawyer from New York I mentioned." "Mother, I'm waiting for Willa," Carter replied firmly. Eleanor's smile tightened. I hoped you'd come to your senses about that. This dinner is important for our social standing. Having your employee on your arm will only raise eyebrows. I don't care about raised eyebrows, Carter said. He was about to say more when he spotted Willa entering the ballroom. She looked beautiful in her simple navy dress. Her curly hair was loose around her shoulders, and Carter noticed she was wearing minimal makeup. But what struck him most was her posture, straight-backed and dignified, despite the nervous look in her eyes. "Excuse me, Mother," Carter said, already moving toward Willa. When Willa saw him, her face lit up with a smile that made Carter's heart race. He took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You look incredible," he said softly. "I feel like a fraud," she admitted. "Everyone else looks like they stepped out of a magazine." "You look real," Carter replied. "That's better than any magazine." As they moved through the crowded room, Carter was aware of the curious stares and whispered comments. He kept Willa close to his side, introducing her proudly as the woman who transformed storm warning. Some guests were genuinely interested in Willa's training methods, but others were clearly more interested in gossiping about what Carter Langston was doing with a woman who wore a simple department store dress and no jewelry except a silver bracelet. "Carter," a deep voice called. A tall man with graying hair approached them. "I heard Langston Acres was back in the competition. About time." "James Preston," Carter said, shaking the man's hand. "May I introduce Willa James, our head trainer?" Preston looked Willa up and down with obvious curiosity. "So you're the miracle worker everyone's talking about. I'd like to hear how you managed to tame that beast of a stallion." For the next hour, Willa found herself surrounded by horse enthusiasts, genuinely interested in her methods. She spoke with growing confidence about her approach to training, and Carter watched with pride as even some of the most skeptical listeners began to nod in appreciation of her knowledge. Then dinner was announced, and the crowd moved toward the assigned tables. Carter led Willa to their seats, only to discover they had been placed at different tables. Carter at the head table with the show's sponsors and judges, Willa at a table near the back with the other trainers and staff. "This isn't right," Carter said, frowning at the place cards. "I'll speak to the organizer." Willa put a hand on his arm. "No, it's fine. This is how these things work. You belong up there, and I'll be more comfortable with the other trainers. Anyway, but Carter," Willa said firmly, "I didn't come here to cause a scene. Go sit with the important people. I'll be fine." Reluctantly, Carter took his seat at the head table, where his mother was already holding court with the Prestons and Whitcombs. Throughout dinner, he kept glancing back at Willa, who seemed to be engaged in animated conversation with the other trainers. "Your mother tells me you're expanding the breeding program at Langston Acres," Lillian Preston said, drawing Carter's attention back to his table. "Yes, we're focusing on bloodlines with both strength and temperament," Carter replied automatically. "Smart business move," James Preston commented. "The market for show horses has been volatile lately." Carter nodded, but his thoughts were with Willa. He didn't care about smart business moves or the market right now. All he cared about was the woman sitting across the room, the woman who had shown him that there was more to life than the expectations that had governed him for so long. After dinner, the orchestra began playing and couples moved to the dance floor. Carter excused himself from the table and went to find Willa. "Dance with me," he said, holding out his hand. Willa hesitated. "Carter, everyone's watching." "Let them watch," he replied with a smile. "I want to dance with the most interesting woman in the room." As they moved onto the dance floor, Carter pulled Willa close. She was stiff at first, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, but gradually relaxed in his arms. "See? Not so bad," Carter murmured in her ear. "Your mother looks like she swallowed a lemon," Willa observed, glancing over his shoulder. Carter chuckled. "She'll survive. She always does." As the music continued, other couples joined them on the floor. For a few precious minutes, it felt like they were in their own world, just the two of them moving together to the gentle rhythm. Then, the music ended, and reality intruded once more. Bradford Whitcomb approached them, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Carter, old friend, your mother mentioned you're considering entering the Prestons' new breeding program. Smart move, they have connections throughout the East Coast. I haven't made any decisions about that, Carter replied coolly. Bradford's gaze shifted to Willa. And this must be the famous horse whisperer. Mother can't stop talking about your unique approach to training. It's just common sense, Willa said. Horses respond to respect and patience, not force. How quaint, Bradford remarked, his tone making the word sound like an insult. Almost as quaint as showing up to the elite dinner in a dress from the mall. Carter felt Willa stiffen beside him. Bradford, he warned, that's enough. No, it's... Fine, Willa said, her voice steady despite the hurt in her eyes. Mr. Whitcomb is entitled to his opinion. If you'll excuse me, I should check on storm warning before it gets too late. Before Carter could stop her, Willa was walking away, her head held high despite the whispers that followed her. That was unnecessary, Carter said coldly to Bradford. Just looking out for you, old friend, Bradford replied with a shrug. You've been away from the circuit too long if you think bringing someone like her into this world is doing her any favors. Carter stared at the man he'd known since childhood and suddenly saw him clearly. The pettiness, the snobbery, the empty life built on appearances and old money. You know what, Bradford? You're right about one thing, Carter said. I have been so way too long enough to forget what shallow, judgmental people populate this world. Thank you for the reminder. Without waiting for a response, Carter left to find Willa. He found her in storm warning stall, her formal dress incongruous against the straw and dirt. She'd kicked off her shoes and was talking softly to the stallion, who had his head resting against her shoulder. Willa, Carter said gently. She turned and he saw she'd been crying. I told you I didn't belong there. No, Carter corrected, stepping into the stall. I don't belong there. I haven't for a long time. I just didn't have the courage to admit it. Willa shook her head. Carter, that world is your birthright. Those people are your friends, your social circle. They aren't my friends, Carter said firmly. A friend wouldn't treat someone I care about the way Bradford treated you tonight. A friend would see what I see when I look at you. Someone real. Someone with heart and skill and integrity. It's not just tonight, Willa argued. This will happen every time we step out together. Every time I don't know which fork to use or say the wrong thing or wear the wrong dress. I can't live like that, always feeling judged. Then we won't live like that, Carter said simply. We'll create our own world. One where people are valued for who they are, not what they wear or who their parents were. Willa looked at him uncertainly. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you, Carter declared, the words feeling right the moment they left his lips. I'm saying that meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. You woke me up, Willa. You made me see that I've been living someone else's dream, not my own. Willa's eyes widened. Carter, let me finish, he interrupted gently. Tomorrow, after storm warning competes, I want to start something new. Not for my father or for the Langston name, but for us. Something real. What about the estate? Your family legacy? Legacies change, Carter said. My grandfather built Langston Acres because he loved horses and he loved my grandmother. Somewhere along the way, the business became more important than the passion that started it. I want to get back to that. Horses valued for their spirit, not just their price tag or ribbon count. Willa looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. You're serious. Completely, Carter confirmed. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. What will your mother say? Carter laughed. She'll be horrified, then she'll get over it, or she won't. Either way, I'm done living for her approval. Willa's expression softened, but she still hesitated. I don't want to be the reason you throw away everything you've built. You're not, Carter assured her. You're the reason I'm finally building what I truly want. He took her hands in his. I'm not asking you to decide everything tonight. Just promise me you'll think about it, about us, about what we could create, together. Slowly, Willa nodded. I'll think about it. That's all I ask, Carter said, leaning forward to kiss her gently. The next morning, the competition arena was packed with spectators. Storm warning was scheduled to compete in the afternoon, and tension hung in the air as the Langston Acres team prepared. Eleanor cornered Carter in the preparation area. I heard you made quite a scene last night, leaving the dinner early to follow that girl to the stables. Her name is Willa, Mother, Carter said firmly. And yes, I left to be with her after your friends insulted her. Carter, be reasonable. You can't possibly be serious about this infatuation. What would your father say? I don't know, Carter admitted, but I know what my grandfather would say. He'd remind me that he built all this because he followed his heart, not society's expectations. Eleanor flinched as if he'd slapped her. That was different, was it? Carter challenged. He was a horse trainer who fell in love with a woman from a wealthy family. Sound familiar? Before Eleanor could respond, an announcement came over the speakers that storm warnings class would begin in 30 minutes. Carter excused himself to find Willa. She was already with the stallion, dressed in the formal riding clothes Carter had ordered for her. The black jacket and white breeches fit her perfectly, making her look every inch the professional trainer. Ready? Carter asked. Willa nodded, but her eyes were troubled. Carter, I've been thinking about what you said last night. His heart sank. And I'm not sure I can be what you need, Willa said quietly. I love you. God help me, I do. But loving someone isn't always enough. It is for me, Carter insisted. Willa shook her head. You say that now, but what about in a year, 5 years? When the novelty wears off and you're left with a woman who still doesn't fit in your world? Our world, Carter corrected. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I don't want to fit you into my old life. I want to build a new one with you. The call came for storm warnings class to begin. Willa took a deep breath. We'll talk after, she promised. Carter watched as Willa rode storm warning into the ring. The stallion moved with grace and power, responding to Willa's subtle commands as if they were a single being. The crowd murmured in appreciation, and even the judges leaned forward in their seats. As the performance continued, Carter realized that he was watching the perfect partnership, horse and rider in complete harmony, each trusting the other completely. It was beautiful, it was real, and it was exactly what he wanted for his life with Willa. When the class ended, Storm Warning had won first place. The crowd erupted in applause as Willa guided the stallion to the center to receive the ribbon. Carter moved forward to join them, his heart swelling with pride. After the ceremony, as they led Storm Warning back to his stall, Carter was surrounded by well-wishers and potential clients. Everyone wanted to talk to the Langston heir about his champion horse and remarkable trainer. For once, Carter didn't care about the business opportunities. He politely excused himself and found Willa removing Storm Warning's saddle. You were amazing, he said. Willa smiled, the thrill of the win still lighting her eyes. He was amazing, I just went along for the ride. You're too modest, Carter replied. Everyone could see it was your connection with him that made the difference. Willa stroked the stallion's neck. He trusted me, that's all. Trust, Carter repeated thoughtfully. That's what it comes down to, isn't it? Trusting someone enough to follow where they lead. Trusting yourself enough to lead with confidence. Carter, before you say anything else, Carter interrupted, I want to show you something. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. This was in my father's desk. I found it after he died, but I never had the courage to open it until last night. Curious, Willa took the envelope. Inside was a deed and a handwritten note in faded ink. My father left me a piece of land, Carter explained, as Willa read the note. Not part of Langston Acres, but a separate property about 20 miles away. It's smaller, just 100 acres, but with good pasture and a stream running through it. Build something real, not for them, for yourself, Willa read aloud from the note. She looked up at Carter in surprise. Your father wrote this? Carter nodded. Apparently he understood more than I gave him credit for. He knew I was living his dream, not mine. And what is your dream? Willa asked softly. You, Carter said simply. A life with you, raising horses the way you taught me, with patience and respect, building something that isn't about social status or family legacy, but about what we love. What about Langston Acres? I'll still run it, Carter said, but I'll make changes. Focus more on quality breeding and training, less on showing and social events. Margaret can handle the day-to-day operations. She's been doing most of that anyway. Willa looked at the deed in her hands, then back at Carter. You're asking me to take a big leap of faith. I know, Carter acknowledged. but I think we've both been afraid for too long. Me of disappointing my family, you of not belonging. Maybe it's time we both trusted ourselves and each other. Willa was quiet for a long moment, looking from the deed to storm warning to Carter. Finally, she smiled, a real, full smile that reached her eyes. "I've never been one to play it safe," she said, her voice growing stronger. "And I do love a challenge. Is that a yes?" Carter asked, hardly daring to hope. Instead of answering with words, Willa stepped forward and kissed him deeply. Around them, the bustle of the showgrounds continued, but they were in their own world, a world they would build together. One day at a time. "Mr. Langston," one of the show officials called, interrupting their moment. "The press wants a statement about your win." Carter looked at Willa, who nodded encouragingly. Hand in hand, they walked to meet the reporters. As cameras flashed around them, Carter spoke not about bloodlines or business strategies, but about trust and patience, the qualities that had transformed both Storm Warning and himself. Later that evening, as they drove back to Langston Acres, Willa rested her head on Carter's shoulder. Storm Warning followed in the trailer behind them, the gold ribbon hanging from his halter. "Your mother still isn't going to approve," Willa said. "Probably not," Carter agreed. "But she'll come around, eventually. And if she doesn't," he shrugged, "we'll still have each other." As they turned onto the long driveway of Langston Acres, Carter felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in his life, he wasn't driving toward someone else's expectations. He was driving toward his own future, a future with the woman who had shown him that real strength came not from control, but from connection. And that was worth more than all the gold ribbons in the world.